We're going to start here in just a moment, but before we do so, and I'm going to ask Dan to lead our minds in a word of opening prayer. If you hadn't heard yet, and I neglected to send the email out last night, Sister Wilma's daughter, when they were doing kidney dialysis on her, her heart stopped. And so they got her heart started again, but put her into an induced coma. And how long are they going to try to keep her in there?
24 to 48 hours, I don't know.
24 to 48 hours,
I
okay.
wish I had went by and see her, but I didn't.
Okay. Well, what we'll do is we'll keep her in our prayers. And so, Dan, when you lead this prayer, let's make a special mention of that. So, if you would, let's go ahead and have a prayer.
Our Father in heaven, we thank Thee so much for this opportunity that we have been given this day to come together and study Thy Word, Your dealings with the children of Israel, and how we can apply that to our lives and better serve Thee. We thank Thee, Heavenly Father, for the blessings and all of the things that we receive from Thee while we're in Christ, and we ask Thee, Heavenly Father, to continue to bless us in this manner. We pray at this time, Heavenly Father, for those of our number who are sick, and we would ask You to restore them to their health so they can once again assemble with us. And especially at this time, Heavenly Father, we pray for Sister Wilma's daughter as she is in an induced coma and having a lot of health problems, and we pray that You'll be with her and be with her family and strengthen them. We would ask Thee, Heavenly Father, to be merciful unto us, and as we realize our sins and repent of them, we ask for Thy forgiveness. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
If you want to open your Bibles to Esther chapter 1, we are continuing this morning through our study of Esther. And we had made it down to right around verse 13. So we'll do a brief recap before we get to that. The one thing I want to make a brief mention of for those who are watching us at home, if you would like to participate in the study with your comments and questions, you will notice that to the left of the viewing window on the Seminole Pointe page, you'll see directions and a link. And if you click on that link, it will open up into our what's called our Ustream.tv viewing page. And I've enabled the chat window. So you still watch us there, and you'll leave the current page on. It'll open up this new page, and video should start playing right away. If not, click start. And you'll see the chat window to the right, and I'll be monitoring it over to my left right here. If you would like to have a copy of the lesson, on the Seminole Pointe page beneath the video window is a link containing our study through Esther. And so that's where we began Esther last week, and we have some who are back and some who are gone, and some who may show here in just a couple of minutes. So now, kind of doing a brief recap, we talked some last week about a woman by the name of Vashti, who King Ahasuerus threw him a huge party, a celebration we estimate it lasted 6 months, I believe it was. This king just showing off his glories in his kingdom, and at one drunken state after the major portion of the parties were done, then he had another small little party. He wanted Vashti to come and let everybody behold her beauty. And she refused to do that. She refused to leave the feast that she had thrown for the women and go stand before King Ahasuerus and all of his friends. Well, as a result of all this, he became very upset, and he, according to verse 13, he called all the wise men together who understood the times. Because if you had the queen not wanting to do what the king said, what was the potential threat that might spread from that point? Well, not as much to her, that's true, but to the nation.
Disenthronement, anyway.
What's that?
Disenthronement.
That's exactly, disenthronement. But how would it affect the population to hear tell of the queen usurping the authority of the king?
All women would, all women.
Yeah. Now, two things we see here. Times are not much different than they are today. One, people jump to quick conclusions and they assume the worst, and people are very quick to follow a trend or an idol. You know, you think about how much trends come and go these days. And there was something, I may have referenced this before, saw on the news a couple weeks back, they were talking about trends for 2013, so I guess it wasn't too many weeks back, I guess. And they were talking about a new trend for men called meggings. All right? You know how you see women wear leggings. All right, now men will start wearing meggings, as they're calling it. Now, we're not talking about the ones that you wear up underneath your pants when you go jogging to keep yourself warm. We're talking about just skin-tight pants that you wear with a shirt. And yeah, I can see the folks from Duck Dynasty going for this, and I never even watched the show. I mean, no. Can you? Don't even try to imagine it. It's just some of the guys they had parading out there and prancing and those things. Just, but the point is, though, you let the right people do it, and what will many people do?
It catches on.
They'll follow. Yeah. Well, what's the story? And we'll get on with this. And my fairy tales and all that are often weak, and Ron has to correct them. But what was the story about the king with no clothes, or the emperor and his emperor's new clothes? Anyway, didn't the population decide to dress like him so that he wouldn't feel bad? You know, kind of establish he set the trend. Well, they had the same things back then, in a manner of speaking. And it's very possible, and we'll start here and read through this and see what we're talking about. But Dan.
Another good example would be the Castilian Spanish dialect, because the king had a lisp. Everyone started speaking as he did, as to not make him feel bad, and that and what came from that was the Castilian dialect of Spanish language.
Really?
It's a whole dialect of it's just Spanish basically, but it's with a lisp. And it's interesting that the king had that. And so that everybody started that, and the language developed from that.
I'm glad the king didn't stutter.
Yeah.
It could take him a while to have a conversation.
Yeah, it would.
Okay.
But that was a similar example.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And so it's very possible, and we'll read verse 13, there are concerns here. It's very possible that, well, it is possible, it is a fact, that they feared that this would spread throughout the nations, and that the women would follow her example. So let's start reading in verse 13, and Miss Wilma, if you would, read for us verses 13 and 14. And I do apologize ahead of time, I'm about to give you some of the names of cities here.
Then the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for this was the king's manner toward all who knew law and justice, those close to him being Karshena, Shethara, and Tarshir, Meres, Arsena, and Nimukah, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who had access to the king's presence and who ranked highest in the kingdom.
Okay, and let's see, Dan, read for us verses 15 and 16, please.
Okay. What shall we do to Queen Vashti according to the law, because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus, brought to her by the eunuchs? And Memucan answered before the king and the princess, Queen Vashti not only wronged the king, but also the princes and all the people who are in the provinces of King Ahasuerus. Ahasuerus?
We would call them Ahasuerus, but we won't quibble over that. And you can call them anyway. That'd be okay too, ain't that right? And Miss Judy, would you read 17 and 18, please?
For the queen's behavior will become known to all women, so that they will despise when they report. They will despise their husbands in their eyes when they report. King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in before him, but she did not come. This very day the noble ladies of Persia and Media will say to all the king's officials that they have heard of the behavior of the queen. Thus there will be excessive contempt and wrath.
Okay. All right, let's back up now to verse 13. Now, notice here what the king does. He calls together his wise men. And these wise men, as it says here, understood the times. And I think that's an interesting wording for that. Understood the times, understood the... we would almost think of it that they understood the thoughts of the nation, the habits of the nation, maybe the peculiarities of the people.
They were in touch with the people.
Yeah, that's a good point. They were the ones in touch with the people. Yes, I should have said that right off the bat, shouldn't I? but that is what I was trying to get out there. That's exactly right. They were in touch with the people, and then they put in a statement here. For this was the king's manner towards all who knew law and justice. It wasn't an uncommon thing for the king to consult those close to him. We see this continuing when Daniel, he's in the king's court. Nehemiah, more than likely, was consulted by the king on occasions, being a cupbearer for the king there. And so he lists some of these people here in verse 14, and focus on Memucan, or however you would pronounce that name, I'm not real certain, because he'll come up here in just a moment in our discussion. The 7 princes of Persia and Media who had access to the king's presence and who ranked highest in the kingdom. Okay, so very well respected by the king. So verse 15, here's the question. What shall we do to Queen Vashti according to law, because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus brought to her by the eunuchs? All right, and what I find interesting about this is the king's not making the decision on his own, is he? He's consulting others. What should we do about this situation? So, Memucan, he steps up. He says, Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also all the princes and all the people who were in the province of King Ahasuerus. So they're saying that she not only wronged the king, but who else? Everyone. Exactly. All of the nation. And here's why. For the queen's behavior will become known to all women, so that they will despise their husbands in their eyes. When they report, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in before him, but she did not come. Now, and then one more. This very day, the noble ladies of Persia and Media will say to all the king's officials that they've heard of the behavior of the queen, thus there will be excessive contempt and wrath. Then,
one of the things that we can take from this and apply to our lives today is, as you are learning the skills of parenting, do not ever argue either the wife with the husband or the husband with the wife in front of the children.
oh, okay.
What it does is it diminishes the authority of either in the eyes of the children. If you argue in front of them, like if I was to make a ruling on a certain subject,
Right.
and then if my wife had come up and questioned that and argued with that, then that diminishes my authority in front of the eyes of the children. So never do that in front of the children. It's one of the things that Judy taught me that, in our marriage that I was so appreciative of. She would never question me, even if I was wrong. She would say, "Can I talk to you for a minute?" And take me away from the eyes of the children, and say, "I've already told them this or that." She would never correct me in front of them, and I thought this was such a great attribute, for her to do that. And
I think that's a good point.
it's a very good thing to do as parents, to never question the other one in front of the kids.
Right.
Now that we're all too old to benefit from that.
Well,
Thank you very much.
Hey, we're not.
most of us, yeah.
Oh, okay. I forgot about the young kids.
Of course, it was my lesson I learned early on, Dan.
Right.
But no, but make sure that we do say it. I think it's a very good point. That does go both ways. If the wife is reprimanding the child and the father walks in, Don't interrupt.
Right.
You know, let her finish what she's doing, and then if it's something they need to talk about, you know. Or set up a signal if you go, you know, that means stop the lecture, look at the spouse, let's go outside for a confab, and then we'll come back.
But see, this happened to them in front
Yeah.
of all of the subordinates
Yes.
in the nation. It hurt them, you know.
Now, what I, oh wait, Ron.
Think about it too. I mean, she declined to go in front of a whole group of women who she had gathered together for her
Okay,
own
Ron
party.
did. That's a very good
You
point.
know, so it was very evident publicly that she was not going to beckon to the king's call.
Right, and that's a very good point that we kind of had overlooked a little bit. There were plenty of women present. The question is how many of them knew that she was petitioned by the eunuchs to come. This very well could have been a very public show. And if she was having a party for all the important women, if you think about it, they would carry this message back, as he talked about here, there in verse 18, the possibility, saying, on this very day, the noble ladies of Persia and Media. They were probably the ones who were present there at this big old feast and party that this lady had had. Now, this seems a little bit exaggerated to me, meaning the fears of the men, but these wise men knew the ladies of the nation. And maybe this was a genuine fear, that you could have a whole generation that would develop where the women would have no respect for the men whatsoever. At least they were afraid of it enough that they took action. Okay. All right. Any other thoughts or comments?
Yeah, down in verse 22, he said he sent letters to all of them.
Yes. Yeah.
So they were concerned about this.
Exactly. Yeah. Whether it's just or not, justified or not, they were genuinely concerned about it. Yeah. All right. And so there's the concern in verse 18 there, that the result would be excessive contempt and wrath, because of what Esther had done, or not Esther, but Vashti had done in taking her stance there. All right, any thoughts?
What does the word contempt mean there? Is that just disrespect? Contempt sounds pretty strong.
Well, that's a good question. Looking here at the King James translation, renders it as contempt also. And the Hebrew word for this, let's see, I need to open that one. It is disesteem
Okay.
or contempt.
Yeah, I thought of disrespect. In our language.
Yeah, strong uses says contempt as well, and it probably with what you're talking about there, the idea of disrespect would probably be the equivalent. The contemporary English version, which I don't recommend studying from, renders the last phrase, they won't respect their husbands and their husbands will be angry with them. They kind of view it from that direction. That in this translation views it as what would happen is that the women would no longer have respect for their husbands, and their husbands would be mad at their wives, and you would have a lot of issues developing as a result of that. So it might be an interesting way of looking at that. All right, any thoughts? Okay. All right, let's continue here. Rhonda, or Jean, let's start with you there. And if you would read for us, beginning of verse 19, let's do 19 and 20, please.
Okay. If it please the king, let there go a royal commandment from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it be not altered. That Vashti come no more before the king Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal estate unto another that is better than she. And when the king's decree which he shall make shall be published throughout all his empire, for it is great, all the wives shall give to their husbands honor, both the great and small.
All right, and then Rhonda, let's do 21 and 22, please.
And to the reply, please the king, and the reply pleased the king and the princes, and the king did according to the words of Michaiah. And he sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province in its own script, and to every people in their own language, that each man should be master in his own home, and speak in the language of his own people.
Okay. All right, let's get back up to verse 19.
Who was Mimcon now?
Mimcon is one of those men, going back up earlier to verse 14, who the king consulted him.
Okay, he was a consultant.
You know, one of the wise men, or
Okay.
yeah,
Or the seven princes.
he was in touch with the people. So, all right. Notice there in verse 19. He says, if it pleases the king, let's do the royal decree. Let it be recorded in the laws of the Medes and the Persians, so that it will not be altered. Basically, an unalterable law, you might say. And here it is, Vashti would come no more before Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. So they weren't going to kill her, at least not as it's spelled out here. She was going to be removed from his presence, and she would be removed from being queen by his side there. All right, any thoughts or comments about that? Pretty straightforward with that one. And so verse 20 then, when the king's decree which he will make is proclaimed throughout all his empire, for it is great, all wives will honor their husbands, both great and small. Okay. Now, let's bring up here, I think we may have showed this last week. And this is roughly by 400 BC, the domain of the Persian Empire over the nations there of that land. And if you want to be able to see it a little bit bigger, I will bring that up here. There. Notice, and this is a pretty good expanse, going all the way from up here to Thrace, down to what would be Libya and Egypt, all the way over here to the past the Euphrates, all the way on to the far side of the Arabian Sea, and even going upward northwards up to the Venice area. W-N-E-S, Venice area. Sorry. Anyway. But yeah, as you can tell, though, it's a pretty wide area there. Okay. Now, think about it, and kind of here's my point behind this, is that this decree was going out in their own language, written in their own hand, in their own language that they would write in and read in, and throughout all this area, the official decree from the king. Can you imagine going down to the center of your town and maybe, you know, hammered up there on some public wall, or maybe some crier standing there reading the official decree that all the women shall show their men respect. You know, this is what they did. Okay. All right. Any thoughts or comments about that?
Makes you wonder if they get the message all messed up after that many times it's said throughout this whole. You know, what does it end up with saying? Is
Yeah.
They start out right, and you never know what'll end up.
That's right. Now, and the decree was real simple. That all the wives will honor their husbands. Now, they probably, bear in mind, these weren't godly people. These weren't ones living based on the law of Moses. These were their own lands, their own cultures. This is not to say that the women before didn't honor their husbands. Okay? It's simply to make sure that the Vashti issue doesn't spread and pollute, if you would, the attitudes of everyone, of all the ladies within the land. And I mentioned this earlier in our start. Think about our own nation. I mean, how quickly do trends spread? You know, you got the whole women's liberation movement going back to the 70s. You've got, I don't know, there's just so many things. Men getting in touch with their feminine side. And it's just so many things that will get started as a trending topic, and people will follow it.
In Egypt, there was a woman pharaoh at one time, and so this didn't say that women were lesser people.
Right.
What this said was that they would honor their husbands, and you can be both. What would I say? The husband could be subordinate in a job situation, but yet be honored at home as the husband. You know, you can separate the two.
Yeah.
So, you know, this wasn't putting down the women. It was just saying that in the marriage situations, they will honor their husbands.
But isn't it interesting? And I agree. I think it's a very good point, applying it to the marital
Right.
situation there. But isn't it interesting, even in this culture, there appears to be, I don't want to say the superiority of the men over the women, but there is a measure of expectation where the women are to show respect towards their husband. The king and then the queen. You know, these were not a patriarchal
Right.
kingdom. It was a monarchical kingdom, I guess if
Right.
that's the right word there. And so all households followed the same structure.
During, and you know, you can read the Old Testament and during the patriarchal times and see that women tended to be possessions rather than equal to the men in a lot of situations, which I never have understood completely. But that's the way it was back then.
Yeah.
They were possessions, basically.
Matriarch instead of patriarch. I said patriarch a while ago. Matriarchal system would be the queen.
Women and,
Yeah. Rhonda.
I was just say, but you know, the Bible does kind of go into that, John, in Romans 2:14, when it says, "For when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature
That's a good
did
point.
the things that were in the law, by nature, I think by nature you see that the male is the stronger and the woman is the weaker. By nature, you know, the man should want to protect and nurture and care for his wife. By nature, she should want to serve and love and obey and do the things that she needs to do for him, because it's set up in nature that
Exactly.
way. You see, the mom of even of the animals, she's the one that's taking care of the kids, tending, you know, and he's the hunter. Go out and bring it home.
Yeah.
You know.
And it just, you know, and you even someone who believes in evolution, you've got to be very careful how you indicate or insinuate that men are created better than women for certain tasks. But you think about it, you know, which man has ever made has ever done great giving birth to a child? None that I know of. You know, the women are the ones who have that talent and ability. And you have exceptions to the rule. There are some cases where the woman of the house may be the heavier worker, may be more adept with welding power tools and, you know, and weed eaters, and the husband may be the one that prefers to be in the kitchen cooking and so forth like that. But in the end, throughout history, you know, you had the situation where the women were, in a manner of speaking, in subjection or to show respect for the men there. Some cultures have been different, you know, but as a whole, though.
I just say, but if that works for their marriage,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
she duly respects him, even if he is a chef in their cooking or whatever, and she is out mowing the yard.
Yes.
If there's a mutual respect, the way God intended it, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
You know, and we want to label it's only appropriate for a man to do the trash and the woman to wash the dishes. Well, you know, that's our choices, and that has nothing to do with respecting the one
Yeah,
the way God
it's not even
intended
male
it.
and female.
Yeah.
It's a personal preference.
It's,
I mean, it's,
I like
and
to-
a lot of it is controlled by customs
Yeah.
or preconceived notions,
yeah.
you know, which may go against some individuals' abilities sometimes. Well, in a pride of lions, the women, or the female lions, the women. The female,
Oh, where's he going with this?
the female lions do most of the hunting.
The female lions.
Yes, they
All
do.
the hunting.
In the
For the
the
young
male
ones.
lions, they just lay around in the shade,
Like
wait for the women to kill something and go eat it.
Well, Proverbs 31, the man sits in the gate, the woman goes out, buys and sells and everything, so.
But if there's another male lion comes into that pride,
Yeah.
they will get fought. You know, there's a dominance.
Which one has the mane?
That's the male.
Male.
That
The
makes
males
sense.
are always the more beautiful animals.
But you know, there is differences in different areas. You know.
That's right. Yeah.
We had a neighbor that if I happened to be driving when we come home,
Uh-huh.
you know, and he'd be sitting,
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, he
Why
said
wasn't he
something was
driving?
wrong because I was driving.
Well, and I've noticed that. I've often commented on how come the woman's driving? And Rhonda says she probably doesn't like her husband's driving, or it's her
He
car.
forgot his license.
Well,
or
in
something.
there you
the
go.
drug culture, the women always drive because the men have already lost their license.
All right, Miss
Sweet
Pat.
dress.
I'm serious. If you just look at it, the women are always drive.
You got a point. John, I can see in this too that this is a lesson on life is not always fair. I think she was a little victimized because
Okay.
there was a drunken party going
Yeah.
on, and we don't know what she was asked to do.
Right.
And if she turned down this because of maybe being a modest lady, then she was right. But like I said, life is not always fair. But we do see that God, He's got providence involved, and her life was spared.
It was, and again, what's interesting about this is it makes you wonder: did they, in her refusal, did they detect a sense of pride, of rebelling against authority, or did they sense a modesty issue?
I
You
kind
know,
of think that because she didn't lose her life
Yeah, that's right.
and could have.
Yeah, almost like it was taken into
And
consideration.
she may have
Maybe.
been able to handle it a little differently. She could have
Sure.
came modestly attired and respectful to her husband, but yet made her point.
If that's what it was.
Right.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
that's what it
yeah.
was. If she was supposed to dance before him or
Yeah.
be scantily attired or whatever for the drunken men of the place, if she came fully clothed and respectful to her husband, but yet made a point saying that I will not do this
Right.
certain thing or whatever, but in respect to you, I will show up
That's
wearing my crown.
It's possible, yeah. All right. Any other thoughts? One thing I do want to throw out before we go on is that when you, in my view of the New Testament, when you look at the teachings on husbands and wife, that in the eyes of God, husbands and wife are equal. They just have different roles. And for as much as the wife is being subjection to her husband, he is to love her. They both. It's kind of like the two axles on a car. All right, that car would not go without the back axle, and it would go without the front axle. All right, some cars, the front axles support all the way to the engine and the front body of the car, and the back set of axles is where the transmission is, and it makes the car go. Other cars are a little different, but marriage is kind of that way. All right, the role of the husband and wife are different, but they're both of equal importance to the functioning of that family. And she is to respect her husband out of the role and position she has. He is to love and show honor to her as to the weaker vessel because of the role and position that he has.
And it's a role of choice.
It is a role of choice.
Neither one have
If you don't plan to do, then don't say I do. It's that simple
I think
in principle.
historically men have made a lot of mistakes in their choices as far as being the one in charge.
Yeah.
They've made a lot of mistakes, and in the Old Testament, they're just in your face, printed out there. How many women in the Old Testament had concubines?
All of them.
Most of them.
Women.
The women.
Oh,
I mean, women had concubines.
I'm thinking
You know what I'm
servants.
And the history that we know of, very few, if any.
You.
Now, there may be cultures that we're unaware of, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying
Exactly.
is the men have made mistakes
Yeah.
from
Let my
the
brain
beginning
work
of
again.
time on in being in charge. I think they have a lot of times made mistakes, and early on, it seems that their ignorance God overlooked occasionally.
Yeah.
And I don't know the reasons of it, but I think today, under the New Testament, we have a lot better plan to follow than they did back then.
I always think of Moses and his wife when she had to circumcise her sons and her anger at him because she was like, this is your God, this is his command,
Yeah, support.
and our kids are going to die because of you,
Yeah.
and obey your God is what
Yeah.
she was pretty much telling him, and
Well, that's a good point. going back to what Dan said, I can proudly say in my marriage, I've not made any mistakes in the last 5 seconds. So, okay.
But I think with our instructions from the New Testament, we're better equipped
We are.
to be better husbands than they were back then.
And you know, they had good husbands for good
Yeah.
times, and they had terrible husbands for,
At times.
you know, at times. So yeah. I mean, look at Abraham. He loved his wife. She honored him and called him Lord, but he made the mistake of listening to her advice regarding Hagar. You know, but it was, I say made a mistake, it was not uncommon what she suggested.
Right.
The mistake was in thinking that was the way God was going to fulfill the promise.
And,
Yeah.
you know,
He
God
kinda
did not
forgot
command that. God did not
Exactly.
command that.
That's exactly
He
right.
He
kind
dealt
of,
with it.
he forgot he was the head of the household there.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. All right, look at verse 21 now. Now, did this reply please the king? It did. And the king said, sure, let's go ahead and do that. And so they sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province in its own script, and everyone in their own language, that each should be master in his own house, which would have included any inhabitants that, you know, Zerubbabel had already led the first wave of Israelites back to the land of Judah. They would have received this as well. You know, it would have been read before the people too.
Which being God's people, they should have immediately said, well, duh. Because
Yeah.
they would have known this, you know, in a sense, you know,
Yeah.
that this is the way God intended a marriage to be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Mhm.
All right, any other thoughts or comments on that? All right, let's take a few minutes and let's walk through the questions here from lesson 1. And then we'll step into chapter 2. All right, take notice here, if you would, in the first question there. Over how many provinces did King Ahasuerus reign?
127.
Yeah, he reigned over 127 provinces. Go back up there, and there it is. Verse 1 there. All right, over the 80 days of showing off the riches of his glorious kingdom and the splendor of his excellent majesty, what did King Ahasuerus do?
Through a feast for 7 days.
Yeah, he threw a feast there. Let's come down here for a moment. And there in verse 5 there, made a feast lasting 7 days for all the people who were present. Number 3, what was offered? Quote, in abundance according to the generosity of the king.
Wine.
Exactly, all the wine there. And did he compel, well, number 4, was the drinking compulsory? No, was not compulsory. He wanted everyone to be happy, verse 8 there, according to his own pleasure. So number 5, who made a feast for the women? Yeah, Queen Vashti there in verse 9 made a feast for the women. When the heart of the king was merry with wine, what did he request to be done? Yeah, he sent 7 eunuchs to go bring Vashti before the king, wearing her royal crown in order to show her beauty to the people and the officials. Okay? Number 7. How did Queen Vashti respond to the king's request? She refused to go. Okay? I just wish Mordecai or whoever recorded this account would have given us just one verse of reason. You know, why? Anyway.
Was she still having the feast for the women at that time?
The feast was still underway. And that was one of the things that Rhonda threw out last week, that maybe she didn't want to leave her feast.
Yeah.
You know, I've got all my women folks here. This is just as important as yours. You know. Who knows? All right.
When women are busy, we don't want to be interrupted. That's just all there is to it.
Well,
If we are getting something done,
It happened again in the New Testament when Jesus was
Martha.
at the house. Martha stayed in the kitchen, didn't she?
yeah. We're busy women.
The sun will set this evening. Statement of obviousness. Or an obvious statement, that's right. All right. I'm glad I said what I did a while ago about the husband loving the wives and being equal in the eyes of God, because, all right, so, number 8. What did the king and those closest to him fear would happen if word of Queen Vashti's reactions actions became known.
Should influence.
Yeah. They were afraid that all the women would kind of no longer their husbands. Yeah, and it would cause possible contentment throughout the kingdom there. And then number 9, according to the advice of Mecuman, what letter did the king send out to all the provinces?
Man and master of their domain.
Yeah, tell all women to have the necessary respect, or more specifically, that they would honor their husbands with both great and small. Yeah. Okay. Any thoughts or comments? All right, let's step over then to Esther chapter 2 now. Esther chapter 2. Okay. Now, starting here in Esther chapter 2, the problem now is that there's got to be a replacement for Vashti. Now, he had plenty of women within his, I don't know if you'd call it a harem, but women who were associated with the king there. So he's going to set out to try to find somebody. And so that's what we're going to read about in chapter 2. Let's start there in verse 2. And let's see. James, is it your turn to read? No, you have, Miss Karen, it's your turn. Okay. If you would, let's go ahead and read verses 1 through 4.
After these things, when the wrath of the king Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what was decreed against her. Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, Let there be fair young virgins sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the women, unto the custody of Hegi the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women, and let their things for purification be given them. And let the maiden which pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. And the thing pleased the king, and he did so.
Okay. Let's go back here to verse 1 now. So he's kind of calmed down a little bit, and he remembers who? Vashti. Yeah, Vashti's no longer in the kingdom, or no longer within his presence, because of the decree that he has set about against her. So there in verse 2, his king's servants, what did they say? What was their suggestion? Or I say suggestion, what did they really give order to be done?
Have the beautiful young virgins be brought before him so he could choose
Round
them.
up all the beautiful young virgins in the empire and bring them.
Exactly, yeah. And what's interesting about the whole story here, it's not the case in point to where he's just going to go, let's take her and let's go back to business as normal. There's a process of beautification. You know, they have to make her, in their mindset, presentable before the king. So they go throughout all the provinces of the kingdom, and they bring the beautiful young virgins to Shushan, the citadel, to the women's quarters, under the custody of the eunuch, who's the custodian of the women, and let beauty preparations be given them. Now, if you haven't read ahead yet, try to take a guess. How long of a beautification process is this going to be?
12 months.
12 months is a year. A year process of beautification. Now, customs is what we're looking at here. Okay.
I would like that.
Sounds good, doesn't it?
A year of pampering and being beautified.
Don't we go need it too?
Okay.
It wasn't one of the nomad customs. Have her scrubbed and brought to my tent. You know.
Good point. Yeah.
This was a longer process.
Did this suggestion here please the king?
Yes.
Yeah, and specifically they were looking for someone to replace Vashti.
Yeah.
You know, to
So
become the queen.
she was going to be royalty, so
Exactly.
it had to be a longer process.
That's exactly right. All right, any thoughts? All right, let's see.
I wish this were an example. We could tell our husbands, well, you want us to be beautiful? We need to go to a spa for about a year.
All right, the next time, here's what Pat just said. Wives, the next time your husband says, why are you taking so long getting ready? Look, it took Esther a year. Yeah, so,
And aren't you worthy?
give me a break, yeah. Surely you deserve at least 2 hours of my time to get ready. I mean. All right. So let's start there in verse 5, and let's continue our reading, and let's go verses 5, 6, and 7. Miss Betty?
In Shushan, the citadel, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, and a Benjamite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives who had been captured with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And Mordecai had brought up Hadashah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and beautiful. When her father and mother died, Mordecai took her in as his own daughter.
Okay. All right, let's go back up here to verse 5 now with this. There in Shushan the citadel, there was a Jew by the name of what?
Mordecai.
Yeah, Mordecai. Mordecai was a Jew there living in Shushan, there in the citadel. He was the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish. He was a Benjamite. All right, so in this story as it unfolds here, they explain that Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives when Nebuchadnezzar came in while Jeconiah, the king of Judah, was reigning there in Jerusalem, and the king of Babylon carried him away. So Mordecai had brought up a young lady, a girl. I was going to say his daughter, but of course it was not his daughter. What was her name? Yeah, Hadassah. And so they brought up Hadassah, he did. What had happened to her father and mother? Yeah, they died. We don't know how they died. They may have died when Nebuchadnezzar came through the land there. We're just not real certain about that. But she did die. And so he had been raising this Hadassah as his daughter. At least he is one that had custody over her and one charge over her. All right, any thoughts? All right, let's see. Let's continue with this, Miss Pat. And let's read beginning in verse 8. And let's read verses 8, 9, 10, and 11.
So it was, when the king's command and decree were heard, and when many young women were gathered at Shushan, the citadel, under the custody of Hegai, that Esther also was taken to the king's palace, into the care of Hegai, the custodian of the women. Now the young a woman pleased him, and she obtained his favor, so readily gave beauty preparations to her, besides her allowance. Then 7 choice maidservants were provided for her from the king's palace, and he moved her and her maidservants to the best place in the house of the women. Esther had not revealed her people or family, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it. That it.
Let's read verse 11.
And every day Mordecai placed in front of the court the women's quarters to learn of Esther's welfare and what was happening to her.
Okay. All right, let's step back up here for just a moment to verse 8 there. One thing I wanted to make note of, and this just for clarification, Hadassah was Esther's Jewish name. Okay, that's the explanation behind the 2 different names there. Hadassah was her Jewish name, what she'd been called, and Esther would have been her Persian name, or a Persian derivation of it. And it means, Esther means star.
We have a U.S. senator whose wife's name is Hadassah.
Really?
Joe Lieberman, yeah, Connecticut senator. If you're going to change your name, it's Hadassah.
So Hadassah. Okay. So that, but what's interesting is we know her at least in the religious settings that I've been raised in is always Esther. But her name, it's like Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. Those were not their Jewish names. Okay. but maybe Esther is easier to remember than Hadassah. So, that being the case there, we find here that many young women were brought to Shushan the citadel. Esther was among them, taken to the palace there of the king. Now, verse 9, the young woman pleased him, or the young woman pleased him. Which one? Which young woman?
Esther.
Yeah, Esther or Hadassah pleased him, and she obtained his favor, so he readily gave beauty preparations to her, besides her allowance. So apparently there was a certain amount allotted for every young lady. You know, people talk about wasteful spending in our government. Can you imagine the amount of money put in to this situation? You know, throughout the province, you know, surely there were 100 beautiful virgins, maybe 200, who knows? And they had to be provided for, taken care of, beauty preparations given each one. But Esther caught the attention of King Ahasuerus, and so he made allowances for her to have extra treatment. Okay. So then 7 choice maidservants provided to her from the king's palace. He moved her and her maidservants to the best palace in the house of the women. You wonder if she started getting an idea that maybe she was going to be picked. Yeah.
He was showing favoritism anyway, wasn't he?
Exactly, yeah. But there was a cultural procedure, I'm going to say, that they had to go through. You know, he just couldn't simply go and say, okay, now you're my queen. But in verse 10 there, Esther had not revealed what?
Her nationality.
Yeah, she had not revealed her nationality. Mordecai had told her, don't do it. Maybe he was afraid of persecution. Maybe he was afraid the king would, dislike her. For whatever reason, he told her not to reveal her family or people. So she did not. And so every day Mordecai paced in front of the court of the women's quarters to learn of Esther's welfare and what was happening to her. He strongly cared for her as he would a daughter. And so he remained there to take care of her and watch over her. All right, any thoughts or comments?
Kind of like Joseph, the favor part.
That's a good point. Yeah, good point. All right, any other thoughts? All right, tell you what let's do. It's right at 11 o'clock now. Let's go ahead and pause our study for today. And we'll plan next Tuesday morning, Lord willing, to pick up with verse 12 and continue through the selection process and what Mordecai does to kind of gain favor with the king. And remember we talked about last week how that Jehovah is not mentioned anywhere in the book of Esther, but we see the providence of God all over the place. And what's going to happen in the life of Mordecai, I believe, is going to be providence, or at least a means to prepare for him to have ultimately favor in the eyes of the king. And it's a very, very interesting story. All right, any other thoughts or comments? All right, appreciate everyone being here this morning, and appreciate those who have been able to watch online. As always, we can be contacted at questions@Seminole Pointe, cfc.org. And tonight on Scriptural Broadcast, we're going to continue looking at resolutions or goals for 2013. Dale is not here. He and Florence, as you know, they're away. But Luke will be sitting in his absence, so we'll get to hear from him during the course of our study this evening to 7:30 at scripturalway.org. All right, let's go ahead and be dismissed. And Jean, if you would lead us in a word of prayer, please.
Father in heaven, we thank thee that we've been able to spend this time together as thy children to study from thy word. We pray that the lessons we learn will enable us to serve more faithfully before thee, and we pray that thou would forgive our sins and bless us as we leave. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.